You're listening to the Doctors In podcast from martinclinic.com. Although we share a lot of practical and, in our opinion, awesome information, what you hear on this podcast is not intended to diagnose, cure, treat, or prevent any disease. It's strictly for informational purposes. So enjoy. Hi, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 183. And today we want to go back to what we did a few weeks ago and a few episodes ago where we go into a little bit more detail on some of the questions that people asked us after one of our live webinars. Now, every time we do a live webinar, afterwards we stick around for quite a while and we answer a ton of questions. And it's a lot of fun because it's live. It brings us back to the days of being on the radio in a live call-in and just people asking questions. And it's a lot of fun. We enjoy that. We enjoy teaching, but I equally enjoy that part of it, just answering the questions. And it's good for the brain. It stretches the brain a little bit. But one of the questions that somebody asked after, we're going to try to answer two questions today, depending on time. One of the questions that somebody asked us after had to do about canola oil and seed oils. And they asked, are they good for you? And what oils do you recommend? So we'll tackle that one first because, we answered that question right after the webinar, but now we want to go into a little bit more what the research says and why, in our opinion, vegetable oils like these high omega-6 crappy oils have proliferated the obesity epidemic, chronic disease epidemic, heart disease epidemic, everything, right? They've made everything worse. Yeah. They're cheap. They're in everything. When you think of processed food, at least myself, when I think of processed food, that's what I think about. These cheap vegetable oils, these cheap high sugar, high processed carbs, and high vegetable oils, right? That's kind
of highly industrialized, right? Like they're in huge vats and has, nothing like an olive oil or anything like that. It sounds healthy, like canola, right? Oh, canola oil, Canada ships it.
Sunflower seed oil.
Yeah, it sounds great, right? But you can run your car on that stuff. That is a highly synthetic, right? Like, when they tell you to run your car on a highly synthetic oil, which is, for your car is good. But
and we've said this before. If you go Google or go onto YouTube and look at how they make these oils, there's nothing natural about them, first of all. And one of the characteristics that they have, they are high in omega-6 fatty acids. Yeah. Most of these seed oils are very high in omega-6 fatty acids, whereas a lot of the better oils are higher in omega-3 fatty acids, right? And because of that, our consumption of omega-6 fatty acid compared to omega-3 fatty acid is very skewed. In fact, research, I'm looking at a study back in 2008, and I know this has changed since then. But even back in 2008, the study that I have in front of me figures that the average Western diet is a ratio of about 16.7 to 1. So for every 1 gram of omega-3, they consume 16 plus grams of omega-6s.
So when people are thinking of omega-3, the first thing that would pop into their mind, of course, is a fish oil, right? And everybody knows that fish oil is good for you. They just know that. I don't think there's a cardiologist that I ever met or ever read about or whatever. One thing they'll do, they'll take fish oil. They know the importance of omega-3, right?
Fish oil, and what's funny is, I don't know what country it is. I want to say either Australia or New Zealand, where they have the color-coded calorie. So they have their nutritional label, and it's kind of color-coded, and they have the stoplight system, green, good, yellow, cautious, red, bad. So what they do is they break out the carb content, the protein content, and the fat content, and then they colorize it, right? Yeah. So the idea sounds good, but of course fat is always going to be...
no matter what kind of fat it is, right?
Red, and I think saturated fat, and so they like there's different things, right? But it's funny, on fish, it's labeled like, even though everybody in the world, like you said, would agree the fish oil, the omega-3s from fish are good for you, it's packaged because it doesn't, for the carb content, it would be green, and but it's literally has a red for the fat content, which is funny, right? So again, it sends such a funny message. But anyways, when you said that, even though they agree that it's good for you, when it came to labeling these things, they labeled it in a way like that. And I've said this before, if I were to make one change on a label, I think that putting things in the label measured in grams is not deceitful, but I think it's deceitful accidentally on purpose, because it's very hard for
people don't figure out.
No, it's hard to do that calculation in your head. So when somebody has 12 grams of sugar, it doesn't do anything for you. But if we know that there's roughly 4 grams per.
So 4 teaspoons of sugar or whatever. Why don't they put that?
Well, that's what I would do. I would have an animation where it would have 4 teaspoons, right? A little small thing.
Yeah.
And
you
you
never
would
drink
know.
Another soda.
No, well, it'd be different, right? With those things like that have, even a high sugary drink, if it had like 15 teaspoons on it, you would, because, you visualize that, right? Take 250 or take 500 milliliters, so two cups of water, and then pour 17 teaspoons. You would never do that. I mean, you wouldn't do that. But that's what happens a lot of times when we consume these things. And so I think it's confusing that way. But anyways, that's a long way off topic, just to point out that the labeling could be funny sometimes. But all right, so back to this ratio stuff. So what's happening is a lot of research is being done now in the area of looking at this real bad ratio of consumption of omega-6s to omega-3 and what that's done on your health. And so what research is looked at, and they found that a higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio promotes this is in the study, the pathogenesis of many diseases. So it can start off the disease process, and they list cardiovascular disease, cancer, inflammatory and autoimmune diseases. You and I have said this before. A lot of people suffer the effects or worse effects of an autoimmune disorder because of seed oils. But autoimmune disorders, and then so they said, okay, the study looked at what happens if you
get that ratio down.
Bring that ratio down. So this is what they found. A ratio of 4-to-1 was associated with a 70% decrease in total mortality, right? So again, that's massive. Then a ratio of 2.5-to-1. So they found this. So in patients with colorectal cancer, they found a reduced rectal cell proliferation. So what they found is it was better. You were better off just by doing that. And then a ratio of 2 or 3-to-1 reduced inflammation in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. A ratio of 5-to-1 had a beneficial effect on patients with asthma. So again, we would never attribute asthma to this high processed diet. But I tell you, there are so many people that when they start to eat whole foods and they have lung issues, they don't even associate the fact that it's improved their breathing. Yet if you ask them about it, they're like, oh, yeah, it's funny. I haven't had the same kind of. So even vegetable oils consumption, processed food consumption, can affect your lungs, right?
Yeah.
Can affect asthma.
Well, it brings up every marker of your inflammation, right? So, how they always say that inflammation's sort of the root of all this disease. Well, I love what you say. Like, inflammation is not Houdini. It just doesn't show up. You got to be doing something to create inflammation in the body, right? So one of the big factors is food, and we know that sugar is very inflammatory, but a lot of people don't realize that the oils, the vegetable oils, are highly inflammatory, because I think the thing that happens in your body is that your body really doesn't know what it is, because it's a foreign invader. If you look at omega-6, omega-6 on its own is all right. Like if you get some plant oils that have omega-6.
Like flax and stuff like that
flax,
are higher in omega-6.
Yeah, and that's all right. They're in nature, and actually your body likes that. But when you get canola oil or these seed oils that are highly industrialized, your body is like, it's like margarine. You got to go back years where the craze for margarine and get away from butter and eat margarine. Well, it was so industrialized. Even though it looked like butter, and it certainly didn't taste like butter, but it looked like butter. But even, I've seen this on YouTube or whatever, like even a mosquito or an ant or whatever, they're smarter than we are. Like if you put an open tub of margarine and butter, the bugs are going to go and eat the butter, but they will never go near the tin of margarine.
Yeah, I'm going to say margarine just because that's how I've always said it. I don't know who's right, but I can't. It's potato.
Margarine.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I agree with you.
I'll say margarine just for myself.
Okay.
Just you could say I actually like when you say margarine.
But it's so true, isn't it? Like when you look at
but
that
it's a
high,
chemical.
It's a chemical high. It
was a lab
plastic,
creation. Well, it is
sake.
plastic.
Yeah.
It's a lab creation, right? It's it's so funny. They sold a ton of margarine over the years because they successfully the very same companies that sponsored research to scare you away from butter also happen to sell on the back end margarine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane how the eating habits of a whole generation were influenced because of breakfast food manufacturers.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
They sponsored a ton of research.
They were smart.
They really followed the playbook of big tobacco in a lot of ways. They've created now people, I don't know about anymore, but I'm not asking enough young people about this, but I mean, for the longest time, I'm 45. I heard my whole life, school and everything, that breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, if I was a breakfast cereal company, if there was one motto I would want people in public to say, would be that breakfast is the most important. I mean, that's literal propaganda.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And they were good at it. Like, I mean, they were marketing geniuses.
Right into the school system, right?
Like even today, like I had a patient in, like it's more rare now, but I had a patient in this morning and said, well, first of all, she was on a statin drug.
Yeah, they're back in the news again.
They're back in the news, all negative.
Always, yeah.
But two, she was sort of boasting to me that she was taking Bacell, which is your, you call it margarine, I call it margarine, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay,
yeah. That's right.
So
that's a brand of margarine,
right? And she was boasting to me, like, and I looked at her like, because I don't hear that much anymore. Like if you go back 10 years, I heard it every day. But now, like the public, because of there's a lot of information out there, and they all agreed, like, that's plastic. Okay, don't eat that stuff. But she was still boasting to me, and I kind of found it like I had a real smirk on my face when she said it to me. And I said, well, I don't think that's too good for you, It isn't? Like, but she was a little bit older.
Yeah.
And just hadn't got the news yet that is fake. You know how we say fake news?
Oh, that's fake
That's
food.
fake food.
That's
big
fake
time.
food. There's no question. All right, so I just want to quickly highlight two other studies on why, we're not a fan of seed oils in any way, but I just want to talk about a couple more quickly. One, which I found interesting is, well, here's one. A consumption of a diet, so if somebody's eating 20% of sunflower seed oil for only 4 weeks, so 20% cause mitochondrial damage and heart dysfunction. Now, this was done in rats. However, here's something else that's interesting. So if you look at cardiac cells, for example, right? Yep. The battery pack of any cell, it doesn't matter which it is, obviously is mitochondria, right? Yep. And mitochondrial research is really is growing tremendously because, you and I have said this for years, that cancer is a disease of the mitochondria. It's a dysfunction at the cellular level, and it's how the cell makes energy and everything. But mitochondria is the battery pack of the cell, right? If you have healthy mitochondria, you're going to be healthy. Disease takes place when the mitochondria becomes unhealthy. Now, as you age, your heart specifically, your mitochondria in your heart, they become dysfunctional. They're less efficient. They don't work as well.
Yeah,
right.
It's like my old battery in my phone.
Yeah, they're not as energy efficient as they used to be. Right. I mean, that's a big thing. Look at even appliances today. Yeah. We had a fridge for 20-something years, and we finally switched it over. And one of the selling points that they're trying to talk about was how much more energy efficient. Over time, your heart cells, specifically your mitochondria, become inefficient as you age. They become dysfunctional. They get lazier in a sense, right? And what they found in this study, and this is interesting, that omega-6 fatty acids, seed oils, make that worse. It causes that to happen at an increasing rate.
Wow.
And On the flip side, they found that omega-3 fatty acids can actually reverse that process, right? Yeah. Which is why we're huge fans of DHA and EPA, but we're big fans of DHA. So even from a heart standpoint, which is so funny, it's so ironic because every food that used to have that heart check sign on it contained seed oils.
Yeah.
Heart check.
Yeah.
So
Good for you.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that's the first study that I found interesting. And then another study, again, looking at, like we just talked about, the actual ratio of lowering the omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids and what that does across the board, and is specifically, again, for heart disease. So, and you mentioned statins earlier, statin drugs. The typical thing is what happens now is you hit a certain age, you get blood tests, and they're like, your cholesterol's high, let's get you on statin drugs. And then you go back and they're like, oh, your blood pressure's climbing, let's get you on some blood pressure medication. And, and then you get on the heart disease merry-go-round at that point, right? Yeah. Once you get on statin drugs and high blood pressure, I mean, you're on a roller coaster, and the end of that is going to be heart disease. I mean, that's what happens, right?
No getting around it.
No, that's what happens. It's like a diabetic who starts to get on insulin. You know how it's going to end. That movie, the script's been written. You have to break that. And we're not saying don't take insulin. We're saying correct the underlying problem. Don't just mask it. Yeah. But anyways,
don't manage it. Don't manage it.
No, that's
another podcast.
That's another podcast. So they do all these things for heart disease, yet a simple thing they can do would be saying, hey, you know what? And they talk about fat and they talk about all these kind of things. Even if they sent to them, decrease your omega-6 intake and increase your omega-3 intake, that would probably save a lot of lives when it comes to heart disease.
Yeah. If you did nothing else.
Because if you increase your omega-3s and you decrease your omega-6s, you're cutting out a lot of those crappy foods anyways. Yeah. You're cutting a lot of that stuff out.
When you're going on a low-carb diet, generally you are really cutting out a lot of that omega-6s, because you always say that the omega-6s is, when you put fat together with carbohydrates, it's your worst poison, right? I mean,
well, and that's the funny. Every time I see a study that says high-fat diet causes this, you look at what they fed. Usually it's a mouse study, usually, or it's a bad observational study.
Yeah, I can't remember what I ate yesterday.
Well, every week, we have a great private Facebook group, and every week a study comes out, and people post it, and because they want to know what our opinion on it, and it's always
an observation.
Well, which was the latest one? Bacon again, right? Bacon came out again, even 85 grams, so one piece of bacon can cause whatever. It was a observational study based on questionnaires that somebody filled out 3-4 months after the fact. I can't remember what I ate yesterday, let alone exact amounts that I ate.
And what they didn't take into account is how many donuts were they eating, how many French fries were they eating, how much pizza were they eating, how much ice cream were they eating.
But they put bacon on their burger. They wrote down bacon burger.
Yeah, bacon burger, and that did it.
That did it. So that one piece of bacon, it's just irritating.
No, I know.
But that's unfortunate.
But people buy it.
Well, it's great headlines,
right?
And listen, those observational studies, when I see an observational study from Harvard, I don't even want to read it. I mean, they are chasing headlines all the time. That coconut's bad for. I mean, they just are constantly
and
chasing
they don't even
headlines.
recant it when they get
because
they get called on the carpet. They don't get even recanted.
Well, no, and listen, if you want to do research, there's not a lot of money left in research. The only people paying for research are drug companies, food companies, and some grants. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the only thing. Yeah. And there are a lot of research facilities that were built for research, and they're all chasing the same amount of money because there's not a lot of money going around. So if Mr. Big Food Corporation comes along and, wants you to study, whatever they have, or they, let's just say they have a low-fat something, so they want study again on why high fat's bad for you. Well, you dig into these observational studies, you make the funniest
conclusion.
And then you come out and that's what happens, and they get a ton of press. And then next time, let's just say I did this study and I go out and I'm trying to get money. I would say I was the guy who did that bacon study showing that, right? It's like a resume. But anyways, I know I'm pessimistic when it comes to studies, but that's what happens. And you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. You're not going to turn around to these companies that are sponsoring your research and tell them that whatever they want, that it didn't work, or, you know, that it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And they've shown this. You can manipulate any data in any study you can manipulate, which is why we'll take clinical experience over research every day of the week. Yeah. Every day of the week. And we always say that research is, when it comes especially to nutrition, is a lagging indicator, but it doesn't matter. All right, so so at the end of the day, we're not fans of canola oil, or we're not fan of like sunflower seed oils. We're not fan of those things at all. Yeah. We much prefer the old-fashioned butter, olive oil, lard. Yeah, olive oil is tremendous, right? A tremendous cooking oil is olive oil. Yeah. But again, you got to make sure you're getting how many times have they lied about the
content of it?
Yeah. They lie about it, right? So you got to get a good one. Generally, you got to pay a little bit more for a good one.
Coconut oil is a fantastic oil.
Yeah, coconut oil is good for you as well, right? So there's
old-fashioned butter.
A lot there. So, so that's the first question. We got a few more minutes. We can talk about the second question. Somebody asked us about fasting. Specifically, the question was, let me just pull it up here and read it. The question was, if a person is fasting for weight loss, what about adding butter to coffee and all these kind of things? What's our take on that? Well, before we answer that question, I want to talk about a new study that came out that was actually very fascinating. And what they did is they took men, and they were basically at risk for type 2 diabetes. So they took a group of men. They were at risk for type 2 diabetes. And what they wanted to do was put them in a 9-hour eating window. Right? So that means for 9 hours in the day, they're eating, and for 15 hours in the day, they're fasting.
They're not eating 9 hours.
No.
Because some people ask me that. Like when you say not eating for 9 hours, no. If you started eating at 8 o'clock in the morning and you didn't eat again till noon, you're in a 4-hour eating window. You ate at 8, you ate at noon, and let's say you ate at 6 again, right? And then you have a 10-hour eating window. You've eaten for 10 hours. That's what we mean by that. It's not like every 5 minutes you have something to eat. It's you ate. You know.
That's right. And that's what. And what's interesting is that with all the food tracking apps like MyFitnessPal and all these kind of things, there's a lot of data available now that researchers are able to go in and look at. For example, how much are people eating, what are they eating, and how long in a day are they eating, and one of the studies that looked at all that data found that the average person was eating about 14 to 15 hours a day. Yeah. So this study here specifically, they wanted to say, listen, a 9-hour eating window. But to go even one step further, they wanted to see if there was and they were going after glucose tolerance specifically. Now, glucose tolerance, they have the glucose tolerance test. What they're measuring to see is how well, basically, does your blood sugar spike after eating uncontrollably, or can you control that spike afterwards, right? Does your blood sugar levels go crazy after eating? And the better you are at glucose tolerance, the less of a spike after eating, right? So they wanted to see the effect of fasting on glucose tolerance. Now, what's interesting, so they took the two groups, and they had one group do what they call early time-restricted feeding. So that's fasting, but this group ate from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So that's their 9 hours, right? So 3 squares a day, basically, right? That's their 9 hours, and they fasted overnight till that. And then the second group did more of a traditional intermittent fasting. They would start eating at 12 and they would end at 9. And then they wanted to check stuff like glucose and triglycerides and all that kind of stuff. So they wanted to see, first of all, does time-restricted eating help?
It work?
On glucose tolerance, and is one better than the other? And we get that question asked quite a bit. Now, here's what they found. Well, first of all, when it came just to pure glucose tolerance, both groups
did well.
Both groups did well.
Okay.
They found, again, specifically, they found that both lead to improved glucose tolerance. So, hey, if you want to have better glucose tolerance, this 9-hour window worked well. And and this is something that we like to say because it's important to understand this occurred, and this is, I'll read you the quote from what they said here. they found that once again, this just went along and proved that the people got benefits even if they didn't lose weight.
Yeah.
So
metabolically, it really helped them.
Metabolically,
yeah.
And they only did this study for a short period of time. It was like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Doesn't take long.
Metabolically, they got better. Even if they didn't lose any weight, they improved on glucose tolerance. Both groups saw a decrease in triglycerides, and that's just 9 hours.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, people ask us this all the time. How many hours, when they start to read about fasting and how many hours should they do? Well, this study here was 9 hours. That's a long window, right? A lot of people, when they do intermittent fasting, they're doing the 12-8. But this just showed even then, like, you don't have to even go full 16 hours. You can even go 15 hours. And, at the end of the day, you shorten your eating window.
It helps.
It helps. It helps your blood sugars. Here it showed it helped and these were people at risk for diabetes. So, again, it's definitely beneficial. All right, so now going back to the question that was asked, somebody's saying, whenever somebody asks about fasting, the first question we always ask back is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for weight loss?
Yeah.
Or are you doing it for metabolic health? Because if you're doing it for metabolic health, it's different in a way than doing it for weight loss. If you're doing it
especially in women.
Especially in women. If you're doing it for metabolic health, or let's just talk about weight loss first, then we don't recommend added fats. Meaning, don't put butter in your coffee because, think about it this way.
Yeah.
If you have fat to burn, then you have fat to burn. You would rather burn your own fat than add added fats to coffee and burn that off as energy, because eventually it has to be burned off.
Yeah.
So you'd rather burn your own fat off. So if you can fast,
it's a better fuel. It's
absolutely
fat.
Yes, and that's
fat
why
is a ketone. It's better.
It's still good for you. But again, if your goal is actual fat loss, then we recommend don't add fat. Don't add.
Ladies, this is for you.
Yes, don't add this. Again, if your goal is metabolic health, that's a different story. That's a whole different story because
then you can have a bulletproof.
Because again, you're not going to. It's a slow burn, so you're still going to get the somewhat benefit of fasting. There's some debate,
as to whether it takes you out of fasting.
Yeah, there's some debate whether it's true fasting if the liver, everything gets a break, but whatever. It's like you said, it's a good fuel, and you're going to get a lot of the benefits of fasting, and metabolically, you're going to get healthier. But if you're trying to lose weight, then we don't recommend it. It doesn't tend to go well for, like you said, especially women that are metabolically in bad shape, right? It tends not to go well for them. So anyways, that's a kind of a little bit longer way to answer that question. At the end of the day, shorten your eating window. You're going to
helps for everything.
Yeah, you're going to be much better off. And you don't have to do it every day, but you should definitely incorporate some form of fasting into your routine.
And for people who, because there are some people just think, well, look, I'm hypoglycemic, I can't do that or whatever. And any, like you say, like just even any kind of stretch the time frame where you're just not eating helps. If you were used to getting up and eating at 7 o'clock in the morning and you waited till 8 o'clock in the morning and you stretched it out a little bit, you get some benefits. If you can stretch it out to 9 o'clock in the morning before eating, you get benefits. And a lot of people, if they just start, and like you say, don't have to do it every day, do it every second day, or some people find it easy during the week and they don't do it on the weekends or whatever it is. All we know is, and I think all these studies are confirming it, any effort you make to lower your insulin, because insulin's the food hormone, that's what gets secreted when you're eating. And if you lower that, you're resetting the body to the extent you're letting the body have a true rest. Because every time you eat, the manufacturing plants gets going. A lot of work has to be done. Insulin is out directing traffic. And you know what I mean? So it really is interesting because we're seeing, what we've been talking about for quite a while now. The science is catching up and saying, yep, any way we look at it, it's all beneficial.
Yeah. Again, we shared a lot of information today. We have fun doing these things. And if you have any questions, there's a lot of ways you can get a hold of us, right? You can go on our website. You can sign up for our newsletters. You can join our private Facebook group. That's a great way to also get. I mean, we had a tremendous community in there.
Yeah.
So many smart people
Fun.
in there answering people's questions.
Yeah,
It's a lot of
amazing
fun.
how people.
Yeah, very, very good group of people. But again, we want to thank you for listening and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Doctor is In podcast from martinclinic.com. If you have any questions, you can reach us at info@martinclinic.com. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, you can head to our website and sign up for free. We also have a private Facebook group that you can join. It's a community of awesome people. Finally, I do a Facebook Live every Thursday morning at 8:30. Join us again next week for a new episode.